All right, guys, here we are, week 5. This week we're going to be talking about the Romans and China. So let's get started with the Romans first. Now, the Kingdom of Rome is the first beginning of the empire. It's a monarchy from the 7th to the 6th century BCE. They start building streets, temples, public buildings, and it's a major area for trade routes, actually, right in modern-day country of Italy in Rome. Now, the establishment of the Republic is going to happen in 509 BCE. The Romans overthrow the last Etruscan king, so the Romans are now in complete power of the Italian peninsula. Now, the Roman Forum is built, the Republican Constitution is built, is made, the executive 2 councils is created, as well as the Senate. So we're going to see the foundation of the Roman Republic is going to be set foot once the last king is gone, and they are now in control of the entire Italian peninsula. Now, within this Roman Empire, or the beginning of the Roman Empire, we're going to see there's a lot of social conflict between the patricians, which are the aristocrats, and the plebeians, which are the commoners. There's a major class conflict because there's a huge economic gap. The plebeians allowed to elect tribunes for representation, but they're not actually directly voting for people. They can only select these people would be great, and then the aristocrats are actually the ones who actually go through and select. Now, the rights are expanded through the 3rd century. The Constitution allowed for dictators to be appointed in times of crisis, so we're going to see that they are setting up a massive foundation of a government. We're going to see that during times of conflict is not just when they are attacked, but also if there is a lot of conflict within their empire socially. And we're going to see they do enact it a bunch of times. The expansion of the Republic is going to start coming once they dominate the Etruscans. They took over the iron industry 5th to the 4th century, which is going to eventually lead to them being the most powerful military the world's ever seen at this point. Expansion via military threats and incentives. So what happens when the Romans come in and take over a part of a territory? What happens is they are giving tax exemptions. They are increasing trade privileges of that area because the Romans like to protect the Romans. They're only going to trade with people who have the privilege of trading with them. They just don't trade with everyone. You have to have within a certain power, a certain place, a certain proponent that they didn't have. So we're going to see that once the Roman Empire takes over your area, you are now able to trade with them on a much bigger scale, and you're actually going to be able to become a citizen. Now, first generation people are, after the Romans come in and take over, are usually not so thrilled about all this. Second generation and on are actually very, very content being Romans because of the tax exemptions, because of the trade privileges, which allow them to make a lot more money in that area, as well as the citizenship. Now they have a very strong, cohesive government managing them. Now, the Punic Wars are going to be a huge conflict for the Romans. They're going to be successful, which allows them to dominate the entire Mediterranean region. Now, the Punic Wars is a conflict with Carthage from 264 to 146, so you're going to see it's quite some time there. They're going to go back and forth, raiding each other, killing each other, attacking, and all these terrible things and terrible crimes. 3 major wars were over Sicilian grain supply. We're going to see that people are going to be raiding their grains and stealing them. And remember, grain is a huge sense and part of wealth because of how important it is to the daily diet. Later conflict with declining Hellenistic empires. So the Romans are going to be dealing with a little bit of the Greeks. It's not a nice clean cut. Keep in mind, of course. So we're going to have a little bit of conflict there with the Greeks, but eventually they're just going to completely die out, and the Romans are just going to take over Greece anyway. And Rome dominates the entire Mediterranean. They are the ones who are going to be in control, and as we all know, they're eventually going to encircle it. Julius Caesar is one of the most famous of the emperors. He is the nephew of Marius. He escaped Sulla's terror, Okay, so he's relatively young. So what happens is he gets out of Rome before he can get in too much trouble, and eventually comes back. He becomes very, very popular amongst the people. He has public spectacles, and he is also a warrior. So he's also a general. So he has victories in Gaul, which modern day France is going to make him very, very popular amongst the people. So what happens is Julius Caesar leads his army back into Rome and takes over it. Yeah, he takes over it, and he names himself dictator for life. Okay, and he's going to be in that position for quite some time. He's going to love it. Now, Caesar is going to start some great traditions that are going to be upheld by future leaders. Now, keep in mind, emperors are not selected because they came into the heart of the Roman Empire of Rome and took over it. However, Julius Caesar did. He also centralized the military governance under personal control, which means he is now making sure that people, his specific people, are now in power. Redistribution of land to war veterans and other allies, which this is one of the big reasons why the military, all the soldiers loved him because they were all guaranteed land once they left the Roman ranks. Major building projects reduce urban unemployment, so all of a sudden all the people are going back to work. And this was one of the major problems that was happening beforehand, is that people are unhappy because they're out of work. He comes in and he gives them a job, which shows you the loyalty he had from the people. Extended citizenship to all provinces, so all of a sudden all of these conquered territories are now really buying in for the first time. They're also going to have aristocrats are going to start to threaten to kill Caesar. He doesn't take him that seriously, and then eventually he will get assassinated by these aristocrats. Obviously, we can see from Julius Caesar's practices, he's not helping and satisfying the wealthy. He's helping and satisfying the normal people, which is obviously a clear and direct threat of the aristocrats. So that's why they killed him. E2, Bruti. Now, the next ruler is going to be Augustus. It's a civil conflict, follows the death of Caesar. Power belongs to Octavian. Okay, Octavian is then going to go off and defeat Mark Antony and Cleopatra in Egypt, and eventually takes the title of Augustus in 27 BCE. So after Caesar dies, well, it's murdered actually, there's going to be a whole tussle of fighting back and forth who's going to be emperor, and eventually Augustus is going to take power. Now, Augustus is monarchy disguised as a republic. Okay, he is starting this whole idea of a true republic, increasing centralization of political and military power. He's eventually going to stabilize the entire empire. He's one of the strongest Roman rulers because of his ability to cut down the conflict, cut down the rebellions. He eventually will die in 14 CE. Now, the Roman Empire, as you can see, is going to encircle all of the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea. It's going to take over all of Mesopotamia. Egypt, remember, these are Egyptians. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, all of that is going on. That's a Roman Empire thing. Romans come in and take over them. The thing that makes the Romans so powerful is when they come in and take over a territory, they're not actually kicking out the leaders there. They're saying, hey, we've conquered you. We clearly beat you. We'll leave you alone as long as you pay your taxes, as long as you pay into your tithes, and we'll leave you alone. You can kind of do your own thing. That's what made the Romans so powerful. Now, Pax Romana, also known as the Roman Peace, is from 27, which starts with Augustus, to 250 CE. It's during this time, trade is at the highest it's ever been. Communication is spreading throughout the world. Roadworks, we're going to have curbs for the first time, drainage, flat paving stones are going to be used, so all of a sudden it's going to be easier to trade goods and move soldiers. Milestones are going to be all the way around, counting down to how far you are from Rome. Postal service is also going to become a lot more fluid. Remember, the Persians are the first one to have essentially a postal service, but the Romans are the first ones to do it on such a massive scale that makes it almost accessible to the normal people. So Pax Romana is a huge part of Roman history. Now, the Roman law is based on the 12 tables. It's created in 449 BCE. Adaptations to diverse population under Roman rule, which means they have different things for different territories. One of the big things that we've inherited from the Roman 12 tables is innocent until proven guilty and the right to challenge accusers in court. So, major component that is still very influential still to this day. Now, the city of Rome has a lot going on. They have a lot of cash flow. Trade is a huge thing. Tribute. All of the provinces have to pay tribute to Rome. Spoils, which means all of the gold, the jewelry, the wealth of Rome is impressive, and commerce. There's so much business being done in this city that it is incredible. It is the center of the world. Massive construction projects, statues, monumental architecture, aqueducts are all being done. And the newest technology that they have for the first time is concrete. Yeah, all the concrete we have is actually a Roman invention, which allows them to be much more successful in building projects. We are going to see that the Roman attractions for it is because they have imported goods. They have so many goods from all of the realms around them that they are able to actually have such a wide array of goods in any location. They had underground sewage for the first time. We're going to start seeing that it's a much more sanitary way. Circus Maximus. Okay, we're going to start having circus acts and animals from all around the realm come together and be shown and demonstrated throughout. The Colosseum is going to be built. One of the largest structures ever made, was the largest structure ever made by that time. And gladiator games, which is for entertainment of watching someone be killed or hundreds of people killed, and pretty cool stuff. So family and societies, okay, we're going to have paternal families or father of the families. They have the right to arrange marriages, sell children into slavery if they need to pay their bills. All of those things are absolutely doable. Women are not allowed to inherit property, and enforcement is inconsistent. Sometimes women inherited property, even though they shouldn't, and sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. Now, the Roman deities, the religion is going to be polytheistic through about 90% of the Roman Empire's time is polytheistic. They have major gods. They're going to take their gods from actually the Greeks, and they're just going to change their names, and absorption of gods from other cultures. So you're going to see that Rome is going to be a lot more of a melting pot of all the cultures, which is what makes it so successful. Eventually, there's a man named Jesus of Nazareth who is going to make his way through the Roman Empire. He's a Jewish teacher. He believes in a moral code and has a reputation for miracle working. And the Romans fear instigation of rebellion, so they crucify him. They're afraid that he's going to start a rebellion against the Roman army, so they crucify him. Come to find out, it's only going to make it worse for the Romans once they crucify him. Now, Jesus' earliest followers, belief in Jesus' resurrection made him divine. The title of Christ, or the Anointed One, is what his disciples and his followers call him, and his teachings recorded in the New Testament. We're going to see that the New Testament is going to be a foundation of, obviously, Christianity, but we're also going to see it as a foundation of other religions as well. Now, after Jesus gets crucified, this whole religion is going to be started by the gentleman named Paul of Tarsus. He extended the teachings far beyond Jewish circles. Remember, Jesus, in fact, was Jewish. Judaism was around before Christianity, because Christianity doesn't start until Jesus arrives, who was a Jew, and he starts his own religion. So he extends the teachings of Jesus beyond the Jewish circles, and he travels widely throughout the Roman Empire, and he starts doing missionary activities and starts spreading the word about Jesus and all he accomplished. Now, these early Christian communities, they have the local leadership, our bishops, okay? Then we're going to start having some regional variation in doctrine and ritual. The nature of the resurrection and the role of women are going to be the things that vary very differently. Depending on what region you are, we're going to see much more women actively participating or not participating at all. Eventually, we're going to see a gradual acceptance of core texts, which will eventually lead to the Bible. Now, the growth of the early Catholic Christianity is all about Roman persecution. The Roman Empire kill Jesus in order to stop rebellion. Well, after Jesus was killed, essentially it only made it worse because everyone else is now like fighting and rebelling, and it starts this massive movement. So despite the fact they're being persecuted and killed for following Jesus, these Christians keep doing it. And then keep spreading, and there's more and more everywhere you look. So, although being persecuted, a dramatic expansion in Christianity occurs, especially with dispossessed, disenfranchised class. We're going to see Christianity really appeals to the poor and to women because it essentially justifies their thoughts and their feelings of someone loves them, someone cares for them, good things will happen if you do good things in this life. So when we talk about Rome, we have to understand that there are two major phases of ancient history. There's a republic and then there's an empire. Now, the Republic, now this is just kind of summarizing everything for you. The Republic was founded in 509 BCE. It's a representative government, citizens, free males vote. The Empire phase overlaps with the Republic, but truly begins after the death of Julius Caesar. So as soon as Caesar's dead, we're going to see the Empire is going to fall into, the Empire is going to be built, which means we're going to start taking over a lot more landmass. Now, the social groups, okay, are going to be the patricians, which are your landowners and your autocrats. Okay, we're going to have the plebeians, which are your farmers, your artisans, your merchants. They could vote but not hold office. And then finally, your third level is going to be your slaves. Captured during military campaign, mostly agricultural work. Okay, now, the political structure of the Roman Empire, the 12 Tables is the first written Roman laws. They prevented laws from being misinterpreted and became the foundation of the Roman Republic. So they're going to be incredibly important. Now the Senate is also going to be created. Now the Senate is going to become the people's speaking, or it's eventually going to allow the people to have a larger say. Now, originally had 300 members made up of landowning aristocrats. Now, we also have the consuls, which is two officials elected by the Senate. One commanded the army, and one directed the government workings. So you're going to have representation of the people actually controlling the army and controlling the government as well. They're limited to just 1 year, couldn't be elected again for another 10 years. One consul could veto or override one another. So you're going to see that this is a very powerful position. If you've ever seen Gladiator, you're going to see the guy that helps Maximus out is going to be one of the consuls, if you're familiar with that movie. Dictator is elected in times of crisis, absolute power over laws and military. They are limited to 6 months. You're going to see that this is going to be enacted very commonly in the Roman Empire. However successful it was, we're going to see that eventually, like all good things, it will come to an end, and the Roman Empire will eventually just not be a democracy at all, but that's another time. So, once we get going, the collapse of the Roman Empire. Now, the collapse of the Roman Empire is because as the empire grew, the republic weakened. Okay, economic problems are a huge problem. They're not using the money wisely like they used to when building the empire. They assumed they were going to have the money forever, and they didn't take it seriously, nor did they put great value on it. We're also going to see a huge gap between the wealthy and the elite in the rest of society. Landowners lived on huge estates dependent on slaves. Slaves are actually going to start outnumbering the actual real Roman citizens. By 100 BC, about a third of the population are slaves. That's a huge amount of people who don't have a say in government and probably are not very happy with their lives. Cities are overrun by unemployed farmers and artisans, so these people have no food, have no place to live. They're obviously unhappy in the government, and they're going to be around, and they're going to be demanding change. Problems in the military, the reliance on mercenaries, so we're now paying people to fight that aren't Romans, loyal to only the commanders and not to the idea of what is Rome. Okay, another problem is made possible for commanders to force themselves in a position of power. So all of a sudden we're going to have these commanders who have more power than even the emperor does at times, and that's not a good thing. Okay, and then the rise of emperors, we're going to have Julius Caesar. Okay, successful politician and general, declared himself governor of Gaul and later becomes, the emperor himself. So you need to know who Julius Caesar is. Many Roman senators feared Caesar's popularity and demanded he return to Rome. Struggle between Caesar and his enemy ensues. Caesar triumphs publicly, and eventually he's elected dictator in 46 BCE, and calls himself dictator for life in 44. Okay, many senators feared, were jealous because of how powerful and how loved he was. Eventually, he's assassinated in 44. Now, the Civil War, after his death, the power is juggled between three men: Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. Now, Octavian is going to later be Augustus, and he's going to take the title of Caesar as well. Mark Antony is going to be in Egypt with Cleopatra, and he wants to take over once Caesar is dead, and he believes he has the right to do it. And then, after a series of battles for control, Octavian declares himself Rome's first emperor. Okay, takes the title Emperor Julius Caesar Augustus, and oversees the beginning of the longest period of Roman prosperity called Pax Romana. So we're going to see that Augustus will lead us into this new realm. Now, Christianity, prior to the 1st century CE, Mediterranean world was a melting pot of religion, ideas, practices, a mix of polytheistic, the Greeks and Romans, and monotheistic, Judaism and Zoroastrianism. Now, when we look at where Christianity comes from, it's from a Jewish kingdom of Judea. It was taken in by Rome in 63 BCE. Over the years, Roman laws became oppressive, and Jews believed that a man would come back to restore their kingdom. Many believe that to be Jesus, and the popularity of this Jesus character was a concern to both Roman and Jewish leadership. Not all Jews were thrilled with this guy named Jesus coming around. It disrupted local leadership. Teachings are often considered blasphemous, and that's going to cause some problems. Arrest was ordered and sentenced to death by crucifixion. Okay, so at that point, it was actually a very common way to die, being crucified. Okay, so why did Christianity become so popular? During the Pax Romana, it made it easy and safe to travel. Ideas, so people traveled to tell them. Common language was Greek and Latin, a system of beliefs that ignored wealth, status, or nationality. It doesn't matter who you are, you can be a Christian. Whether you're wealthy, whether you're poor, whether you're Roman, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Indian, it doesn't matter. Okay, the reaction for the first couple of centuries, it's seen as a direct opposition to Roman laws, which required people to go and pray for their polytheistic religion. Thousands crucified, burned, tortured, and punishment, and for entertainment. Reaction eventually grew popular enough to be officially accepted, and in 312 CE, Constantine wins the battle and credits the Christian God, and this is the Edict of Milan, where Christianity becomes an approved religion of the Roman Empire. In 380, Emperor Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion, thinking it would bring order to the empire. So instead of fighting with all these Christians, he allows them to be a fully powerful religion. Now, the Roman Empire, by 180, you're going to see that it is very, very extensive. Okay, and you can see the power of different rulers, and you can see how it encircles all of the Mediterranean Sea and takes over a lot of territory. All right, that is Rome. So let's talk about classical China. Now, classical China cannot be covered unless you talk about Confucius. Now, Confuzi, or Master Philosopher Kong, was his name. He had aristocratic roots, so he was from a wealthy family. And one of his biggest things is he's unwilling to compromise principles. Okay? He believed what he believed to be true and right. He had a decade of unemployment, and he just wandered around China, experiencing things and seeing things and meeting people. And he eventually returned home a failure and died soon thereafter. When he was alive, he was not very famous, but he did write down his stories and his thoughts and his ideas. So essentially, he disappointed his parents, didn't have a job, wandered around, wrote a book, okay, called the Analects, and he died when he got back from wandering around for about 10 years, and he was not famous, not wealthy anymore, and died. And then his book became popular, and now he's Confucius. and he is a huge founding father of one of the major religions of the world. Now, some of the Confucian ideas is ethics and politics. He says we should avoid religion and metaphysics. We should just be who we are. He believes in superior individuals, the role of government and service, that the government needs to fulfill their role and do what they need to do. He had an emphasis on Zhou dynasty texts. He later formed core texts of Chinese education. He was a huge supporter of the Zhou because of the organization that they brought to the lands. Now, Taoism are people who disagree essentially with Confucian. They're pacifism, rejection of active attempts to change the course of events. They're more about accepting than trying to change things. The founder is Lao Tzu in 6th century BCE, and he wrote The Classic Way and of Virtue, and 2 books that are very powerful. Now, the Tao is the way. That's what the big theory of Taoism. The nature of the cosmos. They believe that water, soft and yielding, but capable of eroding rock. They see the power within nature. Taoism is all about the nature and the blending of nature and allowing the things to work out naturally. Cavity pots, wheel hubs, empty spaces, but essential, is a part of their big thinking process. Now, a part of being with Taoism, you're going to see that Taoists are going to be opposing what becomes Taoism opposes Confucianism, and Confucianism is seen as a public doctrine. That is the way Confucianism supports the government, while Taoism is not supporting the government. So Taoism as a private pursuit, you do it in your own home and you see the world that way. It's not a public thing, quite unlike Confucianism. Its ironic combination allowed intellectuals to pursue both. So people would be a Taoist and Confucian. Usually you're one or the other. However, because it was so hush-hush, a lot of people became both. Now, legalism is a huge component that focuses on the development of the state. It is about being ruthless as long as the end justifies the means. So whatever needs to be done will be done as long as the end justifies the mean. So you're going to see a lot of emperors are ruthless, very harsh, very powerful, and they do a lot of questionable things. However, it's okay, it is legal as long as the end justifies the means. The role of the law is strict punishment for violators. It's about the collective responsibility. Now, the Shang Yang is going to support this, and Hans Free is going to be forced to commit suicide by his political enemies because he opposes it. Now, the legalist doctrine has 2 strengths of the state. It focuses on the agricultural and the military side of each state. It emphasizes the development of the peasant, the soldier, and soldier classes. They have a distrust of pure intellectual and cultural pursuits. So then this legalist doctrine, it's about we have to do whatever we can to support the agriculture and support military. We need to make sure that our peasants are being more well-rounded, and we need to make sure we're supporting our peasants and our soldiers because they're so important foundations of their society. They also don't like just doing cultural pursuits. It has to have a meaning. There has to be a reason to do it. And they're obviously going to be imitated, but very rarely praised. Now, the unification of China is a huge deal that it goes on in the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty develops 4th to 3rd century BCE. That's going to be the next one. They have generous land grants under the Shang Yang. Private farmers decrease power of large landholders. They increase centralization of power and improve military technology. So the Qin are going to do great things for China. The Qin founds a new dynasty as the first emperor. The dynasty ends in 207, but sets dramatic precedent. How they do that is by a centralized bureaucracy. one person is going to begin controlling everything. It's not about small dominions, it's about unified, centralized bureaucracy. They are so powerful, they start building the Great Wall of China, actually. The Qin is the emperor, the dynasty in place, and they are going to start building a massive wall, which will eventually become part of the Great Wall of China. So this is the Qin dynasty. You can see how expansive it is. You can also see the defensive walls to the north, which are the beginning foundations of the Great Wall of China. Now, people aren't thrilled with the Qin policies, as we have found out when we have good emperors, where you have people who oppose always. Now, the emperor orders execution of all critics, so you can't complain about the Qin. The Qin orders burning of all ideological works. It's all about how can we better serve the government, how can we protect the military, those two components. Now, some 460 scholars are going to be buried alive, and others are going to be exiled. Well, we're going to have a massive cultural loss. So we're going to see a lot of cultural or fluffy, happy cultural stuff gone. However, what they Qin do bring in is standardization, standardized laws. They have standardized currency, standardized weights and measurement, and standardized scripts. So we may not have a lot of cultural things left from the Qin. However, we are going to see that their empire is going to thrive because of the unification. They build roads and bridges, and they do massive tomb projects. This one is very, very famous. I'll show you a picture of it. The Terracotta Soldiers is going to be the Qin, built by 700,000 workers, slaves, concubines, and craftsmen, sacrificed and then buried, excavated in 1974. And about 15,000 terracotta sculptures of soldiers, horses, and weapons are unearthed. And it's all for the tomb of the first emperor of the Qin. And it's done as, honesty, as a tribute. Now, the Qin are going to rise and they're going to fall. Now, following the Qin is going to be the Han Dynasty. Now, what's going to bring the Qin down is civil disorder. When you start killing a lot of people and crushing cultural things, people get upset about it. So eventually the Qin are going to lose out, and the Han Dynasty is going to start with a gentleman named Liu Bang, and he's going to take over in 206 BCE, and this empire is going to reign to 220 CE. Okay, so as we get going, when we talk about the Han, we have three different, essentially, dynasties. There's three major periods: the former Han, the interruption, and then the later Han. Now, the early Han are relaxed Qin tyranny without returning to Zhao anarchy. So we're going to have some of the centralized bureaucracy, but not as intense, and the emperors are not going to be as harsh. Created large land holdings, which created a lot more goodwill with the people. Maintain control over administrative regions. They're going to set up a strong power house there in order to ensure. Then, after a failed rebellion, took more central control. So they try giving the people what they want. Less central control and a little lighter. However, we're going to see it doesn't work. So they come back and take over more control. Now, Han centralization is going to be with the Marital Emperor. He increased taxes to fund more public works, huge demand for government officials, and decline since the Qin persecution. So all of a sudden we have a lot more officials that we need. More government officials are getting brought in. Now, the Han also are all about Confucius and all of the thought process. So the Han established an imperial university in 124 BCE. Although the Han aren't known for their love of scholarship, but they demanded education for the bureaucracy in order to have good leaders and good government officials. They have to have some sort of education. So the Han adopted Confucianism as the official course of study. So this is how much Confucianism supports governments, that governments created universities in order to teach it. 3,000 students by the end of the former Han. by the end, 30,000 students. So we're going to see that these students are going to become the leaders of the government as we go through. Now, the Han Imperial expansion, invasions of Vietnam and Korea, constant attacks. Nomads from Central Asia are going to keep attacking horsemen. Okay, we're going to have brutal Madon had soldiers murder his wife and his father. Now, the Han briefly dominates another major Asian force. However, it's not going to stay long. As you can see, the Han Dynasty is going to take over a large amount of Eastern and Central Asia and become very, very powerful. Now, the Han Dynasty is going to be based on a patriarchal society, based on the filial piety, which means everyone is subordinate to elder males. Everybody. The oldest are the ones who are appreciated the most. Now, lessons for women, ban Zhao. Okay, education should be available to all children. So women are now teaching their children minimum things, which means we now have to teach women. Now, iron is going to be already in the Han Dynasty because we've received it previous. However, we're going to see a much more larger expansion of iron manufacturing. Iron tips on tools, abandoned as tools entirely are made from iron. Increased food production is going to be the outcome of more iron and superior weaponry, which make the Han Dynasty very, very powerful. Other major technological developments is the cultivation of silkworms. Okay, when we think China, we think silk. They're the ones who really bring silk to the forefront of Chinese economy. Breeding the silkworms in order to have the most productive. Diet control. So we're going to see that we're going to be limiting what they're eating to kind of control how much they produce and all those components. We're going to see the development of paper, bamboo, fabric abandoned in favor of wood and textile-based paper. And crossbow trigger, horse collars, and ship rudder is going to be tools that are going to be used to help expand their empire. Now, the economic and social difficulties during the Han Empire, the expenses of military expeditions, especially later and into Asia, are going to cost a lot of money. Taxes is going to have to increase. Arbitrary property confiscations are going to rise because they can, so they start abusing their power, and increasing the gap between rich and poor. That's the biggest problem. Slavery, tenant farming increases, banditry and rebellion is going to start. When there's too big of a gap between the rich and the poor are going to rebel. They're just going to. And the wealthy aren't going to care enough to really do anything about it. It's going to become a problem for the government. Okay, the reign of Wang Mang. He was a regent for a 2-year-old emperor. He takes over for a 2-year-old emperor in 6 CE. However, he takes power himself in 9 CE. He introduces massive reforms. He's known as the socialist emperor. Land redistribution, but very poorly handled. Okay, social chaos ends in his assassination. Okay. So, the later Han Dynasty, we're going to see the Han Dynasty emperors manage with difficulty to reassert control. Yellow turban rising, land distribution problems, internal court intrigue, and weakened Han Dynasty collapses by 220. So, in classical China, you need to know the Qin, who run a very, very, very structured ship, and eventually leads to quite a little tyranny. And then we're going to have the Han Dynasty, who's much more socially based, however, going to be overthrown as well. All right, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you guys in class. See ya.